So what do you do if you find a spot, like what would the next steps be with your doctor and, how do they
I
treat these?
I was gonna say if I find a spot for me, like I think the first step immediately for me is going ahead and writing my will, final will and testament because that's my approach to life.
This is On Call.
Else it'd be really cool to just wear scrubs all the time. Then you don't have to think about what you're going to wear to work. Joke is awesome. We're here to answer your questions.
We can sit down and discuss all. Wait, I gotta go. I'm on call.
Wait, you're on call? I thought I was on call. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of On Call with April and Alicia. I am Alicia.
And I'm April.
And we are back. Happy sunshine, April.
Thank God.
I know.
So warm
I feel like
and
we've
sunny.
emerged out of our little, bear caves. Like,
I know. Like we're officially out of hibernation. Can actually go outside during the day.
You know, it's crazy. Hold on. You just said hibernation. Completely jogged my memory. We went to Gatlinburg this weekend for volleyball. Well, they told us it was Knoxville, but we ended up in Gatlinburg. So we're in downtown Gatlinburg for anybody who's not been there. It's I went from Vegas to Gatlinburg, so it kind of feels like Vegas with SHM and then, Gatlinburg for volleyball. So it kind of felt like Vegas and then mini Vegas. But Juliana and I are driving in very, very late because I had just come in from Vegas, had a couple hours on the ground, grab her, and then we take off by car. But we get in at dark and we hit this point where it's like the Smokies. It becomes the Smokies. And all of a sudden I had all of this fear unlocked around bear because I know they see bear all the time in Gatlinburg and the Smoky Mountains are full of it. And all I could keep thinking was it's spring, bear coming out of hibernation. There's bear cub. What if I just get out of my car and there's a cub and I happen to come in between a cub and its mom? I'm going to die from a bear attack. Like I had all these fears unlocked in Gatlinburg. I'll tell you, I did not have a great trip at all.
Well, that's true. That's a true fear though. So we had a sound conference there probably a few years ago now, right in downtown Gatlinburg. We stayed in a hotel down there and we were having our session and we were at lunch and there was a bear right outside the door going through the dumpster, like right when we were right there. And I was like, oh goodness. And people were like going outside of the room and seeing bears like just walking around. And I was like,
and that's what I've heard about. So I've been there one time. I was pregnant with Maddox when I went and it was July and it was miserable. So my memories are not great. Also, I can't understand for the life of me why Ripley's, believe it or not, needs to be in the middle of Gatlinburg. Like just kind of like there's like this there was this museum called, I want to do like proper grammar because my grandmother taught me so much better, but it's called Body Human. I want to keep saying human bodies, but it's Body Human. And then it was like a bunch of cadavers or something. I don't know. It was weird, but the bear thing was super real. And everybody I talked to in the area was like, oh yeah, this is like the time of the year that you see them. And I was like, I have zero interest in seeing a bear. My daughter invited a couple of her friends from her team on Saturday night to go to dinner without asking me first. So I became the sponsor parent. Correct. I just became sponsor parent for a bunch of volleyball girls. And we went to dinner. And as we were leaving, they were heading back up to their hotel and they go, oh, I'm dropping them off at a separate one. Of course, I stayed somewhere different because it was too close. It was too close to the forest. So I stayed somewhere where I was like, they're going to get them first. The bear are going to get them before they get me. But no joke. They were like, we're going to go, like the rest of the team's all meeting at the pool. We're all going to go swimming. Pool's closed because there's a bear. And I was like, see, you should have stayed at the Marriott with me. Sorry, plug. Marriott's not a paid sponsor yet. But yeah, I was like, that when the pool, I'm used to being at the beach and you have like riptide, which is very, very serious, first of all. But your flags, what's the chop of the water? What's going on? I'm used to the flags at a beach. Like, how do you live in a place where they're like, we can't go outside today, school children, because there's bear? I feel like we might be in the wrong place. Yeah, I don't know how you do that.
Yeah,
could you?
Scary to me. No, I don't think so. They're scary to me too, but
well, One of the other funny things that happened during that time was Juliana and I were talking about well, we were going to bed our second night there. I was delusional. You get travel delusion a little bit when you're on the road for work and then you're on the road for life, in real life. And I had a podcast going in my right ear. Of course, it was true crime. And it
Of
was
course.
very like, of course. I mean, what else do you do but do something even more morbid than what we do for a living sometimes? But I put this podcast in. She's kind of talking to me. Like, I really don't know when Juliana's going to talk to me. She's like at that age where it's like, I need to be responsive when she does, but half the time she's probably not talking to me. Um, and I like blurt out, "Oh my gosh." And she goes, "What?" And I said, "Oh, it's something that they just said in this podcast." And it was pretty morbid. It was, he was like the guy, like, dismembered and
Oh
then
gosh.
disemboweled. Some like that, those were the words though. And it caught me off guard. And she goes, "What does disemboweled mean?" And I was like, "Well, hmm, so it's kind you like, you have your gut, right?" And she was like, "You mean my intestines?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, so you have your intestines." I said, "You have a lot of them. So if you cut your stomach open, like they can all fall out. That's what disemboweled means." And she goes, "So like, is that the skinny intestines?" And I was
Skinny
like, "Wait."
intestines?
I go, "Wait, what?" And she goes, "No, no, like no crap." She goes, "You're not going to put this on your podcast, are you?" And I said, "Absolutely, I am." She goes, "I already know you put everything Maddox says wrong on, and now you're going to say, but what is it called? Skinny intestine, large intestines? Like, what are they?" And I was like, "It's
Oh.
small and large." But it was so funny. She was more worried about making it to this segment than anything else. And I was like,
Well, she's made
"Yes,
it.
you are.
Congratulations, Juliana. You made it.
Yay, Juliana. We're going to give you a circle
But does
clap.
she
You made
listen
it."
to even know if she made it?
She listens. That's how I knew
Oh, she
she I said, "How do
does.
you know I talked about Maddox?" She goes, "I listened to your podcast."
Oh, that's cute
I
that she listens.
14. 14.
That's
She listens and she
awesome.
follows us on Instagram. Plug, plug, plug. She follows us. She follows so she hears everything. She goes,
Oh,
"Please,
I love
are
that.
you about to make this into your podcast?" And I was like, "Absolutely. This is great content,
Yeah.
G." I was like texting it in my notes she was as she was
Oh,
talking. So I know. All right. Well, I feel like we've got so much to catch up on. I was telling you right before we started, I dropped a drill on my foot yesterday, and I think my foot's broken. And you were going to
yeah.
tell me.
That happens. I actually dropped I was getting something out of the freezer. This is like years ago, and a pound of frozen chicken flew out and fell.
1 pound. How
Just
specific?
1 pound, but I mean, it was, rock hard frozen, and it landed right on my little toe, and I think I broke it, and I could not walk for, like, days. Like, I was, like, limping around the grocery store, and family was like, "What is wrong with you?" I was like, "I really think I broke my toe from a pound of
A
chicken
pound of chicken.
that fell on my toe." But the drill sounds pretty bad too. You probably
The
did break
drill.
it.
Well, I think I did. I would say I would send a picture. I'll send a picture to you privately. It's one of those things where when I dropped it, I was like, "Son of a mother," like it
Mhm.
hurt, but I kind of forgot I did it until 3 a.m. And I've been up since 3 a.m.
Oh,
Um,
jeez.
and for context, everybody, it's like 10. So a.m. So I'm halfway into my work day. I don't know about you,
Oh,
but
I
okay.
was not awake at 3 AM.
I could have woken you up. I had a lot on my mind. One of the things on my mind, though, was the fact that we're in May. It's gonna be May. We're here. And I do think, in all seriousness, that this could be a good opportunity for us to dive into a topic that does affect like millions of Americans, millions of people around the world, actually, but does fly under the radar, something that we don't talk about a lot. And that is skin cancer. And May is Skin
Yes,
Cancer Awareness, correct?
it is.
Yep. So I thought it'd be a good idea, in our typical fashion, we do something very lighthearted and fun. And this is still, we want this to feel light, but maybe not so much fact or fiction or anything like that, but just really talking about skin cancer. I would love for us to walk through prevention and early signs and treatment advances, and even like some of those myths that we need to retire for the good.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about talking about skin cancer for now?
Sounds good. Let's do it. I'll start off with an easy question for you,
All right,
Alicia.
hit me with it.
Tell us what skin cancer is.
Okay. Well, skin cancer is an uncontrolled growth of abnormal cells in the skin, but it's actually most often caused by damage from ultraviolet or what we see commonly as UV radiation, whether that's from sunlight or artificial sources like tanning beds, etc. It's actually the most common cancer in the United States. So I guess when I think of cancer, I always go to very dramatic and really painful I guess all cancers are painful, but I don't know. Maybe I think the worst. But every year there's actually more people that are diagnosed with skin cancer than any other cancers combined. So there are three major types. We've got a basal cell carcinoma, we have squamous cell carcinoma, and then there's melanoma. And basal cell and squamous cells, they're really more common. They tend to grow slowly. But the melanoma is the one I think that we hear about the most. That's the more aggressive one that can spread really quickly. It metastasizes very quickly, and it can be really fatal if it's not caught early. But the encouraging part is that if skin cancer is detected early, the prognosis is usually pretty good.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
what's the prevalence, April?
So yeah, overall, if you look at it, the research shows that about 1 in 5 Americans are going to develop skin cancer in their lifetime. So as you said, it's the most common cancer in the United States. It's also very prevalent worldwide. And
Yeah.
so the incidence has really increased over the years. So overall, basal cell carcinoma has increased 145% between
Oh, wow.
1976, where it was around 1976 to 1984, compared to 2000 to 2010. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And
Well,
squamous cell carcinoma has actually increased like 263% over that same period of time.
yeah.
Um, and then there's melanoma has increased as well over the years. Um, but the trend with that is over the past decade is kind of varies with age. But in general, there's been about a 31.5 increase between 2011 and 2019. So it's definitely out
Yeah.
there and prevalent, and we're seeing it more and more. And I think too, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but really early detection is key, right? And so
Absolutely.
I think the more that people are aware of it and the more they're watching for it, we probably are noticing more of it, because we're looking for it.
Absolutely. And that's, kind of ties into my question for you here is like if you were to think about this, who would you think was at risk? Who's at most risk for skin cancer? And like, are there any surprising risk factors to you, to anything that resonated when we were studying this topic?
So skin cancer can actually affect anybody, regardless of their skin color. But in general, Caucasians have the highest risk of melanoma compared to other races, and so their lifetime risk again, like melanoma, is about 3%.
Yeah.
And you can compare that to African Americans, which is about 0.1%, and then Hispanics, which is about 0.5%. And so the incidence of melanoma among non-Hispanic Caucasian individuals is about 30 times higher than that among
Wow.
non-Hispanic, Black, or Asian or Pacific Islander individuals. Um, and the other thing I found interesting is that skin cancer in patients with darker tones is often diagnosed when it's later in the stages.
Yeah. Yep.
So that makes it a little bit more harder, difficult to treat, as we mentioned, because if you see it early, it's easier to treat and get rid of. But if you diagnose it later on, then that's harder. So
Yep. And I'd add to that too. My uncle he was born with a lot of like just kind of genetic defects. I can't remember what the diagnosis was, but he basically didn't have the abdominal muscles to support his like like to keep his posture. So he always wore this belt or this kind of um corset type of a thing. But he also had issues with his kidneys since he was very young. He had multiple kidney transplants, and he actually passed away very young from squamous cell. And I remember, obviously being in medicine and thinking when my mom first said squamous cell, and I was like, that's like the easiest to treat. Um, but because of his weakened immune status, the squamous cell actually spread to his lung. I mean, it was pretty grossly metastatic, and that's what he did end up passing away from. So transplant recipients are another like high risk for these type of cancers. And what I actually thought was interesting was pilots and flight attendants have a higher rate of skin cancer,
oh,
but it's likely increased at like UV exposure at higher altitudes.
interesting.
Yeah. I
Huh.
thought so too. Yeah.
The other thing I'll note too is that people with the darker skin tones, they're prone to it in areas that aren't commonly exposed to sun. So like the palms of the hands, the soles of the feet,
Yes.
inside the mouth. You can actually get it under fingernails.
Yeah, I saw the
So
nail thing recently. And it's
yeah.
not new, but I think it's more people that are doing a lot of the UV light with, shellac nail, gel nail, anything that's curing nail polish. Um, I've seen like an increase there. But here's something I'd like to talk about here. S- So we know what the prevalence is, risk, but what are the symptoms? What symptoms should we be looking for?
Yeah, so you wanna look for, any spots on your skin that look funny, right? So, if you have a mole or something already, but you notice it changing, right? So you notice
Hmm.
it getting larger, changing in color, getting raised off the skin. So really anything that sort of pops up that looks different, or that you hadn't noticed in the past is something that you should get checked out.
Yep. And then the ABCDEs. Do you remember that from
I
school?
do.
The
I do.
ABCDEs of what people should look out for. And let me share those with you guys. So, A is we're looking at asymmetry. So, you've got a mole on your skin, anywhere on your skin. What we want to do is look for asymmetry. Does one half match the other? If you folded it in half, would it be a perfectly round circle or would it look really wonky if you did that? B is for the border. Is it irregular? Does it have jagged edges? C is for color. Multiple shades, excuse me. You can have like black or brown. There's some that are red and some that are even white. Some that can show up white on people. And I think I'll tell you, April, always think black is what I get concerned about. But white is how some of these irregularities can show up. D obviously is a diameter. One thing that I remember specifically around this was the size of an eraser of a pencil. I don't know if you heard that, but
Yep.
a mole that starts growing larger than that is something to be looking at. And then E is evolving. Is it changing? Is it changing shape? Is it changing color? Is it changing sensation? These things can itch sometimes. They can even bleed. But even like non-melanoma skin cancers, even start as like a pink bump. They can start as a flaky patch or a sore throat that won't heal, or excuse me, a sore throat, a sore that won't heal. But we often ignore these things. So paying attention to our skin is incredibly important.
Yep. And you can go to the dermatologist and they can do, evaluation of the skin, and then based on your your risk factors, right? Like they can look at your skin tone and family history, things like that. They can let you know how often do you have to come back in and get checked, right? So sometimes it's every
Yep,
year, sometimes it's every few years. But going to get a good baseline eval and then following up on, whenever it's recommended is good practice, because they can
absolutely.
look. There's areas where we can't really see that well, right? So you on your own body, so you got to have somebody else take a look at it.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so you mentioned the UV rays, Alicia. So there's UVA and UVB. So tell us what the difference is between those two.
Oh, this one always trips me up, April. Um, okay. If I'm truly going to try to remember off the top of my head because I did the same research you did. But one is a shorter ray, one's a longer ray, right?
Right.
Okay, tell me more. That's
All
all I
right.
remember. And
So
I know there's a lot of UVs. I also know
yes,
that. Yes.
yes. So as we mentioned, skin cancer oftentimes is caused from exposure to the UV rays. So there are UVA rays, which there are aging rays, so they can prematurely age your skin. So those are the ones that cause those wrinkles that everybody loves and the age spots that we get as we get
We
older.
don't love.
I know, and interestingly, they can pass through window glass. So,
Hmm.
you talked about pilots, right? Like they have that huge window right in front of them that they are, behind flying.
Right.
But also it's funny because when we take like long road trips and I'm in the passenger seat, and if you're on the side of the car where the sun has been shining in, I do feel like I had gotten sun all day.
You
I'm in
tan.
the car. Yeah. Well, for me, it's a sunburn, but yes. Maybe I should start putting on sunscreen when we go on road trips. But And then the UVB rays are the burning rays. So they primarily are the cause of sunburn and they are actually blocked by window glass. So,
Oh, really?
yeah,
Interesting.
right?
I I always wondered, like, when we talked about skin, obviously skin cancer scares all of us, or makes us all think a, a lot about going out into the sun. But I don't want, like, people to worry about going out. I think there's just being smart about sun exposure, right?
Right.
Like, I think our UV, was it the UVA or the UVB is higher, or maybe all of the UV rays are higher between 10 and 4. I always heard that. And actually, if you go like to a little bit south in Caribbean, they'll tell you 11 and 2 are your highest sun indexes. It's actually kind of funny. Juliana will look up the sun index and she uses it in reverse. She'll say, the sun index is 9 today. This is a great tanning day. And I go, this is a terrible tanning day. Like, like the rays are too hot. But, you also mentioned like windows and things like that we don't think about. One thing I heard was always putting on like a SPF for your
Yes.
face routine, even just your skincare. And like, younger, was like, Fafa, I would love darker skin all of the time. But I have started the SPF 30. I think a 30 or higher. They say like you reapply that every 2 hours. I don't do that, but I do it in the morning with part of my routine. But a lot of people forget areas like their ears or their neck or their scalp, or like, and we talked about fingers earlier. There's other areas that we need to focus on protecting as well. But you can still enjoy the sun, right? And those UVA and UVB rays without worrying as
Yes.
much.
For
Yeah.
sure, yes. So you should, yep, as you mentioned, this SPF 30 or higher. And you have to remember too that if you even the higher the SPF, it doesn't last any longer. So the recommendation is,
Yes.
every 2 hours, regardless of, what SPF you use. But it's interesting that you bring up the kids because I mean, I remember as a kid, I mean, we were pretty good about sunscreen, but there were still times where I got burnt to a crisp out at the pool. And experiencing 5 or more blistering sunburns between ages of 15 and 20 increases your risk of melanoma by 80%.
Oh my gosh. Really?
Yeah. Yes. So,
That just gave me chills.
I know. I know. So, and my kids, like everywhere, I'm neurotic about it because I don't want to burn and I don't want them to burn. And I'm always like, put on sunscreen. And they're like, oh, and so if you're a parent listening to this, please make sure your kids are using sunscreen because the more sun damage they get as a kid, the higher risk they have as an adult.
And April, that's a
So
great point because skin cancer is preventable.
it is.
In most cases, I'll say it's
Yeah.
preventable, which is kind of the part that makes it like really frustrating from a public health standpoint for us. It's like the single most important thing you can do, like you just mentioned, to reduce your children, whomever's cumulative UV exposure is avoiding tanning beds and
Yes.
putting on some sunblock.
Yep. And
And
also too,
yep.
they have those like, they have those swim shirts that are long sleeve shirts that you can wear when you're at the beach that, protect you from the rays, that, you can swim in and things like that. So there's even clothing now that you can wear to protect yourself when you're out, swimming or at the beach.
Well, that's a good point
So
as well, because I think people also think that we really only need to do this on the beach or vacation, right? And this is the part where we get lost.
right.
But incidental exposure, like walking your dog or going outside for lunch or like hanging outside with your kids, that all adds up over time. We don't live, I mean, most of us, if you do, please ring me. I would love to live on a beach with you, but most of us don't live on a beach. All of that incidental exposure does add up.
Yep.
So, like you just mentioned, if you have children, like model these habits early. These are habits
Yes.
my family didn't have. We put Crisco on. Like, I watched my mother and her friends put Crisco on and go lay out in the sun. Like, that was, and baby oil and things like really to facilitate tanning. But like you just mentioned, sunburns in childhood, they do increase our risk of
Yep.
melanoma later in life. So, early habits land hard for our kids.
Yeah. Well, and one
Great,
of the
great
things that
point.
like I've started doing too is, well, and of course, like sports fields, if you're sitting at the sports field, you're just sitting there baking in the sun. So make sure you're protected. But I've started always wearing a hat
Mm.
Because you think about, like, I think about the part in my hair and my girl's hair when we're out, and I'm always spraying the part in their hair because you don't think about that.
We
Like, your
forget about that
scalp can
bad boy,
get
don't we?
burned. Yeah, and like the hat, and it's funny, I went to the eye doctor this year for my exam, and she's like, do you wear sunglasses to protect your eyes? And I was like, I just wear a hat, and it protects everything. So I've started doing that too everywhere. Anytime I'm out in the sun for a long period of
Well,
time, I'll put a hat on. So
very interesting. Very, very interesting story. Matt is fishes, out on the water all the time. Just, huge in nature. And Matt had squamous cell in his eye, which
yes.
I didn't even know could happen. And it started as this kind of looked like a sty in the eye. And I remember looking and going like, what is that? And over a period of time, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And he like ended up having to have, I don't know, eye surgeries freak me out, Ape. Like I
I
could do
know,
a
me
lot of
too.
things. I don't do the eyes very well. Had to have that taken out. And his doc was like, he got the cancer in his eye because of his exposure constantly being on the water and constantly fishing as well. And I'm sure that, all was like this says like cumulatively through his
Yep.
years, but it's rough. And I I can relate to the head being burnt, ironically. Maybe that's because I have dark hair and I attract the sun, but a head sunburn is a weird feeling, is it not?
It is. Well, and
It's a
then it starts
weird thing.
peeling and it looks like you have
It's
bad
so
dandruff.
weird, like it is so weird. Okay,
Yeah.
so
So what do you do if you find a spot, like what would the next steps be with your doctor, and how do they
I
treat these?
I was gonna say if I find a spot for me, like I think the first step immediately for me is going ahead and writing my will, final will and testament because that's my approach to life. I'm just kidding. But I would panic, I'm going to tell you. But I'm going to do the ABCDEs of that, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go to my dermatologist. Um one thing that was told to me when I was growing up, and for those that don't know, I'm biracial, darker skin tone than April. I was told growing up that African American or darker skinned non-white people do not get it. It wasn't we were at less risk. It was we don't get it at all. So it was later in life for me, and probably more into my practice, that I realized I probably should see a dermatologist. So I would say if I had something abnormal, I'd start with going to see my dermatologist. If they see something that they think is abnormal, we're probably going to have what, like a skin biopsy or
Yep.
a shave or a punch or excisional biopsy. And then, if it turns out to be cancer, then we talk treatment from there.
Yep.
Did I
And there's
win?
lots of options, right? So they can do cryotherapy, they can do surgery, they can do chemo, radiation. So depending on what that biopsy shows, there are options to treat. Um, and further workup is needed. So, but
Yep.
definitely the first step is to get to your physician and get it checked out and go from there.
Immediately and trust your gut. Because I think a lot
Yes.
of us get in those moments where we like that, we say that drop in the stomach, where you
Yep.
go, we know when it's not right, but we also do avoid kind of taking care of ourselves. Um, I
Well, there's a fear, right? There's a fear that something is going to be wrong. So you're like, oh, do I really want to go? But you should go,
and I think in the
if it
medical
looks wrong.
community, if we're being honest, we do happen to see in the hospital setting, right? People don't come to the hospital because they're okay. So
Right.
we do see the worst of the worst, and I've had peer, our fellow nurses, fellow clinicians, just in general, but one in particular who passed away from this very young. She was very young. She thought it was a wart. We worked
Yeah.
together. She was a nurse, and she was 32. She had two young children. Thought it was a wart on her knee, and by the time they
Mm,
had figured it out, it was like a metastatic melanoma, and that was the first time I got to know melanoma, and had like an intense fear because I watched it take a life at a very young age, and somebody that I was connected to, and I just maybe want to put a PSA out here that like all of us are at risk, but I wish she had known these things at that time.
yeah.
It was just fairly new.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Well,
what's the biggest myth you've heard about cancer?
I mean, as a kid, I heard the same myth you did, right? The darker skinned
Yeah,
people,
that's right.
people would not get it, which is is not true, right? As we
That's
already
right.
talked about earlier. So,
What I learned about that though, Ape, was that melanin, it does offer natural protection, right?
it
That we've
does.
got a little bit more melanin, and but it does absolutely occur with people of
Yes.
color. So any people of color, please know you have the same risk. Whilst your risk may not be zero point 0.3, as April said, percent, what was it? 0.3% to 1% or 0.1%, something like that. But I mean, the risks are a tiny bit lower. There's still risks.
Right.
And like you mentioned, it's diagnosed in later stages, which is tends to be a little bit more tragic. Indoor tanning also, that's a group
Oh,
one
yes.
carcinogen. Um, it's just like tobacco to some degree. And I also want to stop the thought of we don't need sunscreen because it's cloudy.
Oh, yes. The
80%
cloudy
of
days
UV
are the
rays
days.
still come through the
Yep.
clouds.
Yep.
Yep.
So those are the days you actually get burnt more because it's hot, not as hot, and you're out there longer, and then you go in and you're burnt. So,
That's correct. We see the sun and we like sun means sunscreen and clouds mean nothing. But
yep.
that's wrong, people. So, hey, I love this, Abe.
Yeah, it was a good
I know
discussion.
we tend to do a little jokey stuff, but our goal here is to get the right information out and to have these discussions, and even stuff that April and I, like being in this industry, don't know, or maybe things that have changed since we started practice. So, I appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, it was fun. So thanks for joining us, everyone. And as always, we'd love to hear feedback from you. If you have suggestions for topics you want to hear about, you can reach us at our email, which is oncallpodcast@soundphysicians.com. You can also find us on Instagram at OnCall with April and Alicia.
And until the next time, you guys stay well, and we will stay on call. Have
Bye,
a
everyone.
great May, everybody. Bye.